Hello, my name's Paula Julian. I'm a senior policy specialist with the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, NIWRC. I am Filipina, and I live and work on the lands of the Payom Cowicham, or People of the West, on the La Jolla Indian Reservation in California. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to our webinar titled Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, National Day of Action, Uplifting the Voices of MMIW Surviving Families. We take the time today to increase societal awareness of MMIW and publicly honor missing and murdered Indigenous women. We recognize the importance of sharing, listening to, and learning from the voices of the surviving families of MMIW. It is through honoring MMIW that we will prevent Indigenous women from going missing and being murdered. In too many tribal communities, American Indian and Alaska Native women face murder rates more than 10 times the national average. In responding to this national injustice, we recognize systemic barriers that exacerbate efforts to locate missing Indigenous women for families, communities, and tribal nations. Over the last decade, awareness of MMIW as a national issue has increased, but more must be done to prevent Indigenous women from going missing and being murdered. By learning from the experiences of surviving family members, our movement can work to achieve the reforms needed to safeguard the lives of Indigenous women and strengthen the authority of Indian nations and Native Hawaiians to protect their citizens. Thank you to one of our NIWRC partners, our Native Hawaiian sisters, Auntie Nanife Paglinawan and Dali Tatofi, with the Pohana o Nawahine, or Pillars of Women, for joining us from their homelands of Hawaii and starting our webinar in a good way with a pule, or prayer. Thank you to the land, wind, trees, animals, and residents of where our sisters stand for this prayer. Thank you to NIWRC's board chairwoman, Shara Giles, for providing an overview of missing and murdered Indigenous women, including the historical to present day sanctioning of such violence reflected in the lack of consequences for violence against Indigenous women. Thank you also, Shara, for your closing remarks. A special, deep, heartfelt thank you, our love and support to our family advisors and each of their families for sharing their truths with us about their missing and murdered relatives. We uplift your voices for the world to hear. We commit to working with you to create healing spaces for you and your families, to demand accountability from everyone with the responsibility to protect against such violence. And we commit to working with you to prevent Indigenous women from going missing and or being murdered. We all have responsibilities. Thank you to Jordan Daniel with Rising Hearts for her organizing for change through her running, fundraising, and activism. Please join us and Jordan for the 5K, 10K, and half marathon that she's organized that started yesterday, May 4th, through this Sunday, Mother's Day, May 8th. Thank you to our National Congress of American Indians Violence Against Women Task Force co-chair, Juana Mahal Dixon, for closing us out in a strong-hearted way, always reminding us to sing our sisters home. This webinar and all material, including speakers' bios, will be available on our website, and we ask you to please take a moment after today's webinar to complete a survey and share your feedback with us about what you heard today. We invite you to ask questions during the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. We may also follow up after today's webinar if needed. Now to Auntie and Dolly, followed by Shara.
Aloha kako. Hello to everyone. Dolly and I are from the Pauhana o Navahine nonprofit program. And she and I are going to give a pule, which is a prayer, to all the women's spiritual guidance. And we're going to be naming about 20 different Na'aumakua Wahine, and it's women that's going to be covering all the skies, the trees, the wind, the rain, the aina, the land, the ocean, all the elements. It covers every element, and it all has to do with healing and resilience and surviving in times of hardship. And this pule prayer is specifically right now for the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And my name is Nanife Paglinawan, and I live now on the island of Oahu.
And I'm Dolly Tatofi. I also live on the island of Oahu as well.
So the title or the name of this pule is Na'aumakua Wahine. Na'aumakua Wahine, Mena Kupuna Wahine Ali'i. Na'aumakua Wahine, Ikaikina ai Kauanakala.
Na wahine kalavalani kalavanuu o valinu'u o valimanuanua o kanei ola o kaina ola o hamea wahine o kanikavihi o kanikava o ho'one enu'u o peleunua mea o kalamai nu'u o kamohailani o nu'a kea o huli kapa'uia nu'a kea o huli wahine ya kahawiri ya kanelu honua ya kukalani ho'one enu'u ya kuni o ai kaulu ya lehulu ya kamau ya kaoa ka ha'ianu ya umi ya hukini o kalani ya keahi o lalo ya kamakapokia ya kohina o kalani ya missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Ina makua ine a pauloa ya ogo palika ko palika make palika pini kia o mako kauma pula pula na pua keia ikeao o mai mana eri kapu eri noa i ola onua Mama, wanoa.
Thank you, Paula, Auntie Nanny Faye, and Dolly, and everyone for joining us for our second National Week of Action for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, and today, May 5th, our National Day of Awareness. My name is Shara Giles, and I am chair of the NIWRC. I am Muskogee and Cherokee from the Fuswagi or Bird Clan and from Thikachka, Broken Arrow Tribal Town. While history cannot be undone, changes to current federal policies can better protect Indigenous women and save lives. Before missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis can fully be addressed, it first must be acknowledged. Please see our 6-point action plan available in our Restoration magazine to reform current systemic barriers and restore safety of Indigenous women. We are here today to honor our missing and murdered Indigenous women. This includes supporting their loved ones, supporting community healing, and fulfilling our responsibilities as families, advocates, first responders, and as governments, and calling for national, local, and international changes. We are here today to increase and deepen our awareness and understanding of missing and murdered Indigenous women. This must include a public reckoning and turning the volume up on the silence surrounding missing and murdered Indigenous women. We must shed the light of the unmistakable truth in the face of disregard for our calls for help, must communicate loud and clear, and uplift the voices of the families who miss their loved ones. Thank you for sharing your love and truths about your daughters, sisters, mother, niece, and granddaughter, Hannah Harris, Laverta Surreal, and Casey Era Stopped Pretty Places. They too, like many other Indigenous women, went missing or were murdered because of the historical colonization and genocide committed against Indigenous nations, for which there has been little to no accountability. They do not go missing or murdered to any fault of their own. Missing and murdered Indigenous women represent one of the most horrific aspects of the spectrum of violence committed against Indigenous women from the womb to the grave. The recent unearthing of our young girls and boys from a not so distant boarding school era is a present day example of this. Murder rate of Indigenous women is more than 10 times the national average on some reservations. Indigenous women experience disproportionate rates of domestic and sexual violence, as reflected in numerous reports and affirmed in congressional findings. Native Hawaiians experience a disproportionately high rate of human trafficking, and 64% of victims in Hawaii identify as being part Native Hawaiian. Missing and murdered Indigenous women are a continuation of historical pattern of violence committed against Indigenous women, Indigenous nations, our homelands, and natural resources since European governments and the United States claimed our homelands as their own. The United States apologized in 1993 and in 2009 to the Native Hawaiians and American Indians respectfully for such violence and the long range of economic and social changes that have been devastating to the population, to the health and well-being of Indigenous people. Missing and murdered Indigenous women have been an injustice since these governments laid their claims with very little to no impunity. The U.S. Court of Federal Claims opinion in the 2009 case of Laverta Elk versus the United States stated, in 1867, various tribal leaders spoke to Congress about the mistreatment of their people by white men. Their testimony documented the mistreatment of women in their nations who were killed, mutilated, otherwise attacked, and coerced into prostitution and other sexual relationships with United States soldiers. This testimony was well documented in the Conditions of the Indian Tribes, commonly known as the Doolittle Commission Report. 155 years later, Indigenous women continue to experience such violence with little to no accountability to the offender of public, federal and state justice systems, or of society as a whole. Over the past 40 years, we as survivors, advocates, and Indigenous leaders have organized our groundswell to take care of and restore our protections of our women rooted in Indigenous laws, beliefs, cultures, and ways of living. We are also organized and will continue to change and indigenize our state and federal laws and international conventions. Tribes implementing special domestic criminal jurisdictions since 2013 have shown the immediate local and tribal responses to domestic violence and violation of protection orders can and do hold offenders accountable and protect women. Such tribal implementation is why our grassroots organizing was successful in the recent reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. At securing the expansion of tribal jurisdiction to include crimes of child violence, sexual violence, sex trafficking, stalking, obstruction of justice, and assault of tribal justice personnel. Since 2006, advocates, families, and tribal leaders have provided compelling testimony during government-to-government violence against women consultations. And since 2017, they have provided testimony at Senate and House hearings dedicated to missing and murdered Indigenous women. We have seen changes as a result. Tribal, state, federal, and international policymakers in all sectors of community must work with us now to address this historical pattern of failed systemic responses. We must break the all too familiar pattern that our family advisors are speaking on today and will share. A Native woman goes missing. Her family or friends report that she is missing to law enforcement. Law enforcement and the justice system fail to respond in a timely manner to find her before it's too late. Her family or friends organize community searches for her and initiate their own investigations. Her family or friends organize social justice calls to action. Missing and murdered Indigenous women is preventable. We can and need to do more to protect our Indigenous women. We must continue to organize together to amplify our voices as a rallying cry to policymakers and society at large about these injustices for Indigenous sisters who are missing and murdered. Less than 60 Native women's shelters and less than 300 tribal domestic violence and sexual assault programs does not meet the needs of Indigenous women. Your time with us this week and today helps us to honor our missing and murdered Indigenous sisters and to advocate for appropriate systems and social changes calling for safety and justice. Thank you for spending time with us today. Paula, back to you.
Thank you, Shara, for that overview. Special thanks to Claudette Pippin for her quilts that we're using to honor our 4 sisters represented with our family advisors, including Patsy Whitefoot honoring her sister, Daisy Mae Heath. The families of 3 of these sisters will speak today, including Melinda Limberhand and Rose Harris, honoring their daughter and sister, Hannah Harris, whose birthday is today, May 5th, the National Day of Awareness for MMIW. Happy birthday, Hannah. Tiffany Sorrell and Valina Guy, honoring their mother and sister, Laverta Sorrell, and Yolanda Frazier, honoring her granddaughter, Kaysara Stops Pretty Places. Melinda and Rose.
Hello, everybody. We want to thank you for joining today's webinar and for hearing our voices as family members of MMIW. My name is Melinda Harris Limberhand. My Indian name is Manhowat. I come from Lame Deer, Montana on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. We, the family of Hannah Harris, have come a long way since our beloved Hannah Deanne Harris went missing and then found murdered. First, we had to conduct our own search for Hannah when the BIA cops told us that this is the powwow weekend and we are very busy. So you can look for her yourselves. And if you don't find her by Monday, then we'll step in. We are one of the many families that this happens to. First, we were just fighting for justice for our beloved Hannah. And I felt that we had to fight for our missing and murdered on our Northern Cheyenne Reservation. We came up with 21 names back in 2013 of people who were both missing and murdered. And this included men also. As of today, we have around 32 names of missing and murdered on our reservation. We were so lucky to have people who are behind us, our community representative, our county representative. We were so lucky to have people who were behind us, our county commissioner, our county representative, our tribal administration. Without these people who are supporting us, House Bill 21, Hannah Zach, would not be here today.
Hi, my name is Rose Harris. My Cheyenne name is Me'io. It comes in sight woman. May 5th is a national day of awareness for thousands of Indigenous people who go missing and murdered each year. It's also the day of Hannah Harris, my baby sister's birthday. A member of the Northern Cheyenne tribe, Hannah Imshkehat, which means pemmican woman, was killed in 2013. My sister's legacy prevails through Hannah's Act, which authorizes Montana Department of Justice to assist local law enforcement in missing person cases and for a database to keep track of all the missing and the murdered in Montana. This is the first state to pass this bill, but every 2 years it has to go through Senate in order to keep it going. Like most people on reservations, we have the killers walking free. We have some that also did time for their crimes, but it was just a slap on the wrist. Me and my family are angry and upset that my sister's killer is out and walking free. He was never charged with rape and was not put down as a sex offender. It's still hard knowing that he's walking free and we have to see him. We can't get him banned from our reservation because no one will help us. My family needs more help to push for these loved ones and all of your loved ones, and have open talks on our reservations and have a safe place where we can go and talk to people about our issues or what we're going through. We also need a spot where people on the other side of the spectrum, which would be the killers' families that are innocent or haven't done anything, have a safe place where they can also go and talk and feel safe and be able to grieve as well. We, as a family, hope that there is something for kids and youth so they'll have a place to go and mentors to talk to, or even something like a mentor building. With all of this going on and everything happening in the world today, we have to stand strong together and make sure that we are doing our part to keep people safe in our communities.
We have spoken at many events about MMIW. We've been on Dr. Oz, MTV, and many more. Throughout it all, we have to go back in time and face the trauma all over again. It takes a lot of willpower to reveal the events that have happened to our loved ones. And I want to say to you, you are a true warrior. Never give up. With that being said, I have had NIWRC to turn to when I felt I didn't have anywhere to go. I see this as a big problem. I want to talk to people who have gone through things already, or that people who have that are going through it right now. But there was only NIWRC for me. Rosie and the rest of my family had to deal with their trauma by themselves. And if our family has to go through this, I know that every family of MMIW go through this too. We, the family, have almost gone full circle. My daughter's accomplice in her murder has been released on January 19th, 2022. We, the family, felt so defeated because our tribal council said that they would help us to get him banned from our reservation. One of the biggest problems I see is that nobody is really there to help us. I feel that if we are treated this way, other families of MMIW are treated the same. We have no jail here on our reservation, and that becomes a big problem. People are getting away with drinking doing drugs every day, putting other people's lives in danger. Now appeals and fentanyl, things are only to get worse. We don't do this for fame and fortune. We do this because we love Hannah. We love our community and we love you. We do this so others don't have to go through what we did. This is just the first round for us because we'll have to go and do it again when Gina gets out of prison. Our full circle is not complete. I feel that I just now got a call last night on the male accomplice that he has been picked up again for probation violation. I feel that he has not learned his lesson. I feel that he's still a danger to our community if he's going to continue to keep on doing what he is doing. He has not taken responsibility for his actions. He has not said sorry, even though we probably wouldn't want to hear his sorries because he has no heart. With that being said, I just want to say thank you to everybody for listening to us today.
And I want to say, use your voice, talk about it, make actions, and let's keep moving forward as a team because that's what we are. We're a team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mia Ish.
Thank you, Melinda and Rose, for honoring Hannah with your continued bravery and advocacy. Thank you for speaking up with your tribe, the state of Montana, our nations, and the world. We support you and your family's ongoing healing and your call for accountability from your tribal government, the state of Montana, and the federal government, each of whom have a responsibility to protect against such violence and to help surviving families heal from the trauma of a relative going missing and or being murdered. You deserve support and assistance from your tribe, Montana, and the United States. How many surviving families struggle, including the children of missing and murdered Indigenous women, with no counseling and support or other assistance? Now to Tiffany and Valina.
Hi, everyone. My name's Tiffany Sorrell. I was born in Chinle, Arizona, but I was raised mostly in Navajo, New Mexico, and I attended Windrock High. I'm the eldest daughter of Laverta Sorrell, and today I wanted to share the story of her disappearance. For the longest time, this was something I never talked about. I think it was definitely a coping mechanism that we had learned to just kind of bury down. But everything just happened so fast that as children, we didn't really know how to comprehend. So to give some background, the night of July 4th, 2002, I drove myself and my two younger brothers to the Navajo Nation Fair. Our parents were following us there, and we kind of just went our separate ways. We knew we had a curfew, but being young and having fun with friends, I lost track of time. And my brother Nick, he ended up going home with some other cousins of ours, so I wasn't too worried about him. I was mostly trying to get my brother Dave together and get going. And I had this old Nokia cell phone that only took local phone calls and I think landlines. And I got a call from my dad, Edison, and he was asking where we were, when we were going to be back. And I thought I was going to be in trouble because I was late, so I was rushing. And by the time we got home, surprisingly, there was no one there. I didn't think it was too strange because we were kind of left home alone quite often. It wasn't a big deal. I used to babysit my cousins and brothers, and I was the oldest, so it didn't seem too strange. I remember that we started to light some fireworks with our neighbors, and it gets a little bit blurry after that. I don't really remember much about the days after or that night. I don't really remember what time we went to bed or anything like that, but I believe we did ask, where our mom was in the morning, and we kind of just got the response that, she's with that man. My parents were having marital problems, and it was a tough time for us kids because they were fighting a lot. And Edison would tell her, go ahead and leave, but you can't take the kids with you. And so eventually they did sit me down and they told me that they were getting a divorce. And I actually felt a sense of relief because now the fighting could stop. But the next thing I remember from all of this that happened was some police officers in my room when I woke up, and I actually thought I was in trouble because I was only 14 years old and I was driving, and I thought, oh man, did I break some kind of like traffic law or anything like that? But they were actually asking about my mom, and I remember some of my aunts were there. After that, Edison, our father, did tell us that he dropped her off at her work and that she was going to get picked up from this guy that she was having an affair with. And at the time, it didn't seem totally far-fetched because our mom was, having an affair, and it wasn't uncommon for her to be gone a couple of days. And usually when they fought, she went to her sister's house, my Aunt Valina, and she would stay there with her. So it wasn't like it wasn't too out of the normal, but as kids, we just kind of thought she was going to come home. But as days passed and weeks passed, we were kind of sheltered at that point from everything. Our mom's family, a wall was kind of built up around us. The only kind of response that we got from our father was that we didn't really know her, that she was having an affair, she drank, she had a DUI. We don't really know what kind of people she was hanging out with, and as kids, you don't really understand. And our mom just really wasn't talked about after that. It just wasn't discussed, and all I knew was that my mom always told me I needed to take care of my brothers. If we ever fought for any reason, she would always kind of get after me and tell me, you're the oldest, you're the responsible one, you're supposed to take care of them, not fight with them. And my baby brother, he actually still slept in the bed with her. So after she was gone, he slept with me. And I had to grow up so fast. I ended up taking on that mom role for my brothers. And the older I got, the more autonomy I had to start thinking for myself. And my brother Nick and I, there were times that we would sit up late at night and talk about our story. And there were things that just didn't quite make sense to us. And soon we started to reconnect with our mom's side and kind of learn more of the details and the days that led up to her disappearance. The FBI reopened her case and they shared with us even more details of the investigation. And we kind of started to realize that these questions we had were valid. Like I said, it's taken me a long time to really start opening up about our story. And one of the main reasons that I wanted to start talking about this was because we were always told that we didn't know our mom, or that her character was kind of, I feel like, dragged through the mud a little bit, that, you know, she was having an affair, she had a drinking problem. You didn't know the kind of people she hung around with. And I may have not known that side of her, but what I do know is the kind of person she was, the kind of mother she was. She loved us. She always came home to us. She was such an open and warm person, and our home was always so filled with family. We had gatherings, birthdays, holidays, Super Bowls, even the Arizona Wildcats basketball games. And what I really am hoping for by sharing our story is that families can learn from this. And because her character was such the focus, the victim blaming, I think that's why there was not a lot of push on law enforcement to really start looking for her or go deeper into that investigation. And although it's been a tough journey, it's really been helping me to heal. And I hope that families themselves start to take those steps in healing and doing therapy and remembering the true character of their family member, and not let the gaslighting and victim blaming take over. And that's all I had to share.
Thank you, Tiff. I really appreciate that you've decided to come forward and share. And last year when we did the video for the organization to be part of this webinar, I gave our perspective to my sister's disappearance and what we as her sisters and my brother Charles had been going through and what we were feeling at that time. And this is just a whole nother perspective coming from what the children of those that have gone missing is like. And for my niece, it's taken a really long time for her to be able to share that story and now to begin that advocacy for her mom. So I'm really proud of her because that takes a lot of courage and strength. And she's finally starting to develop in that way. And I'm so happy for her that she's doing this. One of the things that we really would like to continue to ask or to request for is that we continue to work with the FBI, the Navajo Nation Police, or the Criminal Investigations Department, and the BIA's Office of Missing and Murdered Unit, that there be more collaboration on her investigation. We ask that there be more transparency in terms of what the investigation is revealing or where it's going or what is happening. It's been 20 years and we don't receive updates on what is happening. And we would really like to be able to see that start to happen. There should be a connection with families when these investigations are going on. We've sat patiently and quietly for 20 years. And I really think it's about time that we start to be heard and that we start to really work together with these agencies so that we can find out what has happened to our missing and murdered family members. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yolanda Frazier, and I am Kay Sarah Stott's Pretty Places grandmother. Kay Sarah came into my home in 2012, and around the age of 10, along with her younger brother and sister. I became their guardian, and so she was with me up to till the day that she was murdered. What happened with us is Kay Sarah turned 18 on August 14th of 2019, and she still continued to message me, call me, get hold of me for permission to do, to do things. And she wanted to stay longer and visit relatives and hang out with relatives after Pro Fair of that year. And she called me for permission. So one of the things that happened is when Kay Sarah's auntie went to report her missing, the officer there at the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office was very dismissive about Kay Sarah, because she turned 18, and his excuse was that she was probably out partying and would hanging out with her friends and would show up. And another attempt was made by her auntie, and then at that time she was told that there was a time, some time, so many hours had to go by. And it just, when we looked into it later, because we didn't know any better, when we looked into it later, we found that no, she was still considered by the state, and this is where it's contradictory between being 18 and me not being her guardian any longer. She's an adult, to even filing a missing report when they're 18, they're still considered, so they're still considered a child. And that's priority according to the missing persons reporting system. And but we found out days later that they never filed that report. There was never a missing persons report filed on her. For the first 4 or 5 days, we were under the assumption that there was a missing persons report filed. And to this day, any reports that we ask for, we're not given any report. We have no update on her case. The state did let us know that Bighorn County has not reached out to them, will not share the file. Because we're trying to ask, we've reached out to the state to look through her file, to take over the investigation. We've also reached out to the Murdered Missing Unit under the Bureau of Indian Affairs to look into her case for us. We've reached out to them, and I'm not sure what's going on with that, but I do know that Bighorn County, for some reason, the Sheriff's Department will not release her file to anyone. It just makes me question why. There's so many anomalies within Kay Sarah's case, and no family should have to go through this. If your loved one is murdered or missing, there should be some type of communication. That I believe that the resources that are available to organizations like the Bighorn County Sheriff's Department, they're within the justice system. They have resources. They could reach out to the state. They could reach out to the federal government. So, but they won't do this, and they won't share the file. It came to our attention that This was through the Bighorn County Attorney's Office. He did a media report several months back, and it came to our attention within that report that there wasn't actually an investigation going on, an actual investigation in Kesara's case for weeks. And we questioned why, but of course we're not getting any answers on that. And we have reached out to and petitioned to the Montana Funeral Board because there was anomalies within what the coroner, what his activities were with Kesara's body, what took place with that, where he took the body, you know, from the state medical examiner's office, took the body back to his place of business, his mortuary, and the undersheriff that was that replaced was reassigned to Kesara's case, took her body away from the coroner, and this is Willis Mortuary in Hardin, Montana, took her body back to the medical examiner in Billings, Montana, and they were able to identify her body at that time through her dental records. But there's just all these really events that took place, activities that are just unexplainable, and they're just, to me, they're just I'm just blown away by it. So all these red flags that took place has made us, our family, Kesara's family, we've started our own investigation as best as we can. We don't have the training or the background for it, but just common sense and looking into each and every step. And so what we found out is there's, you know, this is through county attorney, there was no actual investigation going on. We found out that the responding officer had to recuse himself because he was involved with a brutality beating of Kesara's brother prior to her murder during Crow Fair. And so that gives us the fact that he recognized Kesara. He knew that that body was Kesara when he responded to that call when her body was reported. But our family, and that was on August 29th, but our family wasn't officially notified until September 11th. And one of the things I'd like to point out too there is that her auntie went to the crime scene and was not allowed to look at Kesara's body or even at her clothes. The officer wouldn't let her. And one of the other things that really stands out is that Bighorn County did not cooperate with any of the news agencies in the area, the Billings Gazette, or any other news media. So there was no reports of any sort at all. So there were no reports of a missing person, and there was no media coverage that a body had been found. And the only way that we knew was through the young people, or they were doing Snapchat, and that's how I found out that there was a body found. And they said it was of a a young girl, 17, to Stottsville. And that was through my brother messaged me on my phone and said, he said, "Where's Kay Sarah?" all in capital letters. And that his granddaughter had messaged him and let him know that she was reading these Snapchats. And that was on the 29th. And the 30th, they were still they were still Snapchatting. It was all around in social media, but there wasn't anything on our news, our news like Color 8, Channel 2. Even the Bighorn County News didn't have it. And it wasn't until September 19th that we contacted the Billings Gazette ourselves. And they were blown away also. They said they call all the county sheriff departments in Montana for any updates, any news, and they weren't told. And the reporter apologized profusely to us, and I just felt bad because it's not her fault, But all these events that took place, and there's more, but it's just, it just sends up red flags of why wasn't there an investigation going on? Another thing that happened at the crime scene, the person that called and reported that they found her body said that the police did not cordon off, with the tape and secure the scene. There was people going in and out, just all kinds of activity around there. And so why was the scene not protected? Why wasn't it preserved? And when we went there, there was still stuff all over this. It's a public area. They're right by a public highway, and there was still all kinds of, like pop cans and cigarette wrappers and just things like that all over the place there. And so why didn't they canvass that? Get that area, get all those things that might have fingerprints on them, or work with that scene in the right way. And we when we had our first march, our first rally to bring awareness to this injustice, we had community members coming up to us that live right in the area and told us that they walk by there daily and they would have noticed that there was a body laying there. And yet the Bighorn County attorney and the Bighorn County sheriff would lead us to believe that she just laid down and died there. And so our family has had to move forward and, just step by step trying to work and figure out these different things. Finding out that there's no investigation going on, finding out that the first responder had to step down and recuse himself, finding out that the second undersheriff that took over the case, he was not given, according to what he said, not really given all the details of what took place when the body was found. Why did the coroner take her body from the medical examiner's office if that wasn't identified yet and take it back to his place of business? And then the second undersheriff had to come and take the body back to the medical examiner. one of the questions I asked myself during that time period was, what would be the motivation for the coroner to do this? Because it really, in my opinion, jeopardizes his business, his license. Why would he do something like this? This is an ongoing investigation. Once we found out, I'd never received a call from the sheriff's department or the coroner that they identified the body as Sarah. My son, her father, never received a call. We were never officially notified. The county coroner, Bullis, he never officially called us or notified us, so we were never part of identifying her or having any part in her arrangements. And I live 65 miles away, and at the time her dad lived little over 500 miles away. And we didn't receive a call, so we weren't able to go in and be with Sarah's mother, Geraldine. And then she went with her sister and her friend to try and identify Sarah and talk to him. She was coerced into agreeing to cremation. Geraldine, to this day, is adamant that she did not want cremation, did not sign a document. She was under duress, she was incapacitated, and no decision should have been made at that time until the father came or until I came and we could all meet together. And yet Terry Bullis, pushed ahead and coerced her and told her that she had to cremate her if she was going to get her back in order to have a burial or a service. Sarah's Aunt Grace filed a complaint to the Montana Funeral Board, and she was denied. Recently, I filed a complaint as my son's power of attorney and the next of kin to Sarah, and we were denied based on Grace's complaint. So our complaint was never given its own individual consideration. And so I'm not sure, but we're going to try to fight that also. That's one of the things through our fight for justice that I would like to really work on, is to on that board, the funeral board, is to one of the things I would like to see and change on the funeral board is have the ability for the families that are filing, for the people that are filing, that they would have opportunity to also speak. The way it's set up right now, only the person that you file the complaint against, in this case Terry Willis, is able to speak during that hearing. We can listen in, but we can't speak. And I also noticed that there isn't any Native American board member on there. And there's 3 board members, and I don't call that a representation, across statewide. So there's several things within that framework for the way that board is made that needs to be changed. And another thing that in our struggle that we've come across is I looked up and researched into the Montana state law, what's the requirements for a coroner in Montana. And there really isn't anything. They don't have to have a medical degree of any sort. They can take a course if they're elected or appointed. This person can take a course and then they're good to go. And they're in this really pivotal position. What they determine, it just sets the course for the rest of the case. Whether they say it's hypothermia, whether they say it's non-determined, or if it's a homicide, it all depends on them, and they do not have the education to make these determinations. And then we have the conflict of interest where we have coroners that are actually businessmen and they own the mortuaries. And so you have this conflict of interest there. Recently, I just had a family member that passed away in Oregon. They have medical examiners that will go to the scene, and this just happened to be in his home. So a medical examiner went, and the way that our family described what took place, they were very thorough. They had the education for it. I want to talk about widespread changes for all of the people here in Montana and in any state. I know MMIW, MMIP, MMIWG, all of our murdered, missing Indigenous people struggle with these types of barriers. You know, in different states, I know there's different laws or different ways, but there seems to be commonality of certain types of barriers that we still continue to have to fight for justice. And I know some of this is some of it seems like it's like the wall is too high. We just can't climb it. We can't do it. We can't fight against it. But, you know, the support that's there for us now that wasn't there before for our people. We have organizations like yours, MIRWC. We have organizations like Summer Body Institute. We have organizations that, you know, throughout the country now that can really help us. And we have influential people and policymakers that can back us and help us make these changes. We had some pro bono help. We created a website to bring awareness, and we wanted to keep it updated, and we're kind of struggling. We have a large amount of supporters and emails that we need help with, so that we can we promise to do updates, you know, and get emails out, but it's been kind of stalled because we need some technical help with that. But one of the things that, you know, I talked about increasing the reward because and fundraising for that, because we're not really getting a response, and I know these people are in fear. We've had tips and stuff, but they're in fear. And then with Bighorn County not, you know, wanting to share the file or update us on anything, we don't even know how far, and if anybody even investigated the tips, you know, that were given to them. But I do know one thing: there was an elderly gentleman that gave us a tip, and his house got burned down, and he didn't get harmed. He's alive, but his house is burnt. down. And my son said, well, Mom, because this person that helped us with the website said, well, with the reward money, like going forward, she suggested having a time frame on it, and then maybe using that money to hire an investigator. Where would that money be most productive, you know? And it makes me want to cry because I've been, I guess I'm not ready to think that nobody will come forward. I still have that hope, you know? So through all our struggles, and you know, it's worldwide. We've all been dealing with the impact of COVID, the loss of family members. Our family has a high count of we lost a lot of family members to COVID. It kind of put us on it felt like a standstill, but in the background we've been planning and trying to work at what can we do for our next steps for justice, not only for Kesera, but to impact all of our families that are struggling with the same fight. And some of the things that really stand out is that we want to bring awareness to every barrier and every encounter that Bighorn County has been put in front of us, a barrier that the state of Montana has been put in front of us, and up to the federal level, the federal government. And we need help. We need assistance to bring this awareness, to have these make these officials accountable, and to bring about changes and lasting results. And one of the things I really want to point out is that Kesera's body was found less than a mile from the Crow reservation line. And what we keep hearing is that there's these, there's a BIA jurisdiction on the Crow reservation, there's the state jurisdiction, there's a county jurisdiction. And my question is, so we get this type of answer from the federal government also, that there's a policy in place. And my question is why, when we as Indigenous people were given that by promise from the federal government, they wanted to take over and oversee us. They wanted to, create the Bureau of Indian Affairs to take care of Indigenous people, oversee them. And I know there's a lot of history behind that I'm not going to get into, but basically what it comes down to, when someone is murdered, they step back because they say it's policy. And we have our loved ones, our families, all of us that are being impacted by this. To me, it's a broken promise. And we need help changing that policy. We need help changing. One of the things our families have encountered with all of this and trying to get assistance at this county level, the state level, and the federal level, through the BIA, the FBI, is that they have all these different policies in place on how they communicate and work with each other. And they're barriers for our Indigenous people at a very critical time in our lives when we're trying to fight for justice for our loved ones. The state level, when we try to reach out to them, they said, well, it's up to the Bighorn County officials. They need to ask us. They need to request. And then the state level, when I talked to the FBI, they said they need a request from the state. The request goes through the state and go to the Bighorn County officials, and they say, well, we can't This is not a federal case. We can't give them any information. This is all by policy. So they're all hiding behind these so-called walls that we can't see. But I really believe by our rights, our treaty rights, the Indigenous people are supposed to be taken care of, or any activity, criminal activity like this should be overseen by the FBI. What I would like to see for our people, for my granddaughter's case, for all of our Indigenous families that are suffering through the same situation as us, you look and see, you know, we're aware, and there was a case last year that got this humongous media attention. She is not Native American, but you saw, you know, through the media reports, all these agencies, we had federal agencies, state agencies, county agencies, all through their justice network were assisting on her case. They all came together. There was no barriers put up saying, oh, this policy, that policy, we can't do this, we can't do that. We need permission from the other entity. It wasn't there. And there was outcries in Indian country about this. And I felt it too. I felt it because my girl, you know, Sarah deserves it just as much as any other person. She deserves justice. All of our Indigenous people deserve justice. We shouldn't have to come up against these type of barriers. We shouldn't have to conduct our own investigations. And so that's one of the reasons I'm doing this, is because I'm coming on and talking is to appeal for help to get these changes made, to get this all in place for our people, and to get Sarah's case to some kind of resolution. Okay, so we have plans, you know, being here, supporting awareness for the murdered and missing and Indigenous people, for our family, for other families impacted by this murder and missing. We're planning like every year. This is what we're trying to do, an annual rally on May 5th for National Awareness Day for murdered and missing women. And here in Montana, we have the Hannah's Act that declares that day also for Montana. Hannah was my niece through her mother, Melinda. And that's when I started becoming more aware. So we're planning this rally on May 5th at Bighorn County. And we want to invite all the families in Bighorn County to come and join us, to help bring awareness to their loved ones, to their fight for justice. And one of the things that we're reaching out for support is we do have a website. It's called Justice for Sarah. So the address is justiceforksarah.org. And we'd like to reach out to a lot of our supporters. We don't have a lot of technical skills with it. If there's anyone that has could help us pro bono, that would really be appreciated. So on our website, we want to keep updates on there, and we want to reach out to everyone that was struggling with this, help them to have maybe a guide or things like that to help them when they encounter these type of issues. So really appreciate this opportunity. It's always really hard and emotional, but got to step past that, and I pray for all the families. I know that we're not the only ones impacted by this. We're gonna have several families speaking today for help bring awareness, and that are fighting for justice for their loved ones and for change for all of our Indigenous people. Thank you again. And all my prayers and love to all of you.
Thank you, Yolanda and Kaysara's aunt, Grace Bulltail, who is one of our family advisors, for honoring Kaysara. We will not forget Kaysara, Laverta, Hannah, Daisy, and all of the other missing and murdered Indigenous women. The memories you share of your granddaughter and niece will live on in all who hear you. As we've learned from Tilly Black Bear, we are spirits on a human journey, and their spirits live on in all of us who advocate for healing, accountability, protection, and prevention. And now from our sister Jordan and her organizing to raise awareness and honor missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives through her running.
Mobila Tonka, many thanks. So thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be part of this week of action, to be in this virtual space with all of you. We are here for a very important week, but just want to, really emphasize just how important the momentum and the support, not only for this week, not only for May 5th, not only for Hannah Harris, not only for the many families who have spoke, the advocates who spoke, but that we really need to continue this beyond May 5th. So beyond the week of action. This needs to be every day, every week, every month, all 12 months of the year. And that's where I come in. I look at myself as an advocate, and so I'm just really honored to have the platform and the resources to be able to do what I do. So I'm Jordan Marie Brings, Three White Horses Daniel. I am Kowi Chasha Lakota and Navajo, and usually I'm in Los Angeles on Tongva, Chumash, Kich, Jacquemin, and Tataviam lands, Los Angeles, California. Right now, currently, I am on Manahoac, Monacan, and Saponi lands. I'm staying with my family, and they're helping me take care of my 2.5-month-old baby boy. And it's just really great to be with him and be on this side of Turtle Island. And so one of the things that I really enjoy doing and put my heart and soul into is the advocacy work that I do within Rising Hearts. And Rising Hearts over the last few years has taken a pivot in terms of, becoming more community-based and community-centered and trying to create an intersectional pathway to cultivate community in a meaningful way, making sure that there are pathways for us to communicate, to be able to unlearn and relearn from each other, to be able to call in co-conspirators and allies into this heart work that we do while still holding space to center and uplift Indigenous voices and the things that we care so much about. So Rising Hearts at first really began as a grassroots community organizing group. We helped organize marches and rallies and panels and protests back in Washington, D.C. We were founded back in 2017. And we started with Occupy Inauguration and the Women's March, and that led to the Native Nations Rise, to People's Climate March, March for Racial Justice, March for Science, and beyond. And then once I had moved to Los Angeles, I didn't want to take up space in a new community, so Rising Hearts, really became a more of a supporter, and we helped with donations or made, supply runs. Wanted to support the local community who was already doing this work. Like I said, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but we wanted to see how we can support the community. And then after a little while, we got the blessing from the community of like, hey, we know of Rising Hearts. Like, why aren't you guys organizing and like doing these things like you used to in DC? And then I got the blessing. I was like, okay, well, I guess we could start doing this again. So our very first event that we had organized was a panel talking about the epidemic and international crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives. And luckily my sister friend Cheyenne Phoenix helped me organize that. We had amazing voices. We had a great turnout in the local community. And then our next event was our second annual Running for Justice community run that we held in Griffith Park. And this was all before the pandemic had happened. And it was just really great to create that space to be able to center Indigenous voices, to be able to honor those who cannot run, those who are no longer here, to honor the families who are still fighting, and just really trying to use at that time the platform that was basically handed to me without asking for it or planning for it. And what had happened was the month before May 5th, I had the opportunity to chaperone with Wings of America to support the 5 youth running in the BAA 5K in Boston, Massachusetts, and just be with them and cheer them on throughout the whole weekend. But I had the opportunity to run the Boston Marathon to help fundraise to support Wings of America and all of their programming. And what led to this run, usually I'm going to just race for myself, trying to go after, my personal goals and ambitions as a professional runner. But after what had happened the last several months, trying to organize, trying to mobilize, trying to activate, especially non-Indigenous people, I had kind of lost hope in people caring about all of the women and children and relatives that are being taken and stolen from our families, from our communities. And the reason why this was so important to me, and maybe why I took it to heart even more, was being a survivor of violence, and my mom being a survivor of violence, and me literally not having any women in my social circle being being a survivor of violence too, like having them have those experiences is just really heartbreaking. And having some family members who were stolen from us, it just made me think, like, why can't people care about this issue? Why don't they care about us and the families? Why are we not getting the visibility in the media and in articles? And why isn't this being talked about? Why aren't the funds being appropriated and allocated to these communities, to these programs that are truly life-saving? And why aren't we having the legislation to really correct this issue and to address it? And so after organizing prayer vigils, after speaking on panels and speaking at rallies to intersect this issue of MMIW with the climate crisis, feeling kind of just so disheartened, I was like, I'm going to run for them. After having organized these community runs, after participating in a couple prayer runs back in DC, welcoming the Standing Rock Youth and welcoming Protect Oak Flat for their journey from Arizona to Washington, D.C., and just learning from them and taking what I had learned and putting it into my own. And that's where I decided to run the Boston Marathon and dedicate 26 miles to 26 missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And this wasn't to be a political statement, nothing to be flashy, nothing at all. But this was a way, if these panels, if these, me sharing on Instagram, if me trying to get funds to getting people to donate or to share about it, if that's not working and having an impact, then maybe the impact I can have is just to be able to remember them and honor them, to be able to say their name, to be able to offer support to their families. And to be able to use my social media to talk about this and to hopefully direct folks to organizations and to the communities that are doing this work. And so after that run, I had shared about it, honestly thinking probably no one's going to care. Maybe within our own community, Indigenous communities will care, and maybe they'll think something of it. But beyond that, I honestly didn't think other media platforms and other people who are not Indigenous were going to care. And then once I made that post, everything changed. And basically, I got all these requests. Can you speak about this? We want to write about you. We want to use your photos. We want to do this and this and this. And I was really conflicted because I was like, I can't say no because this is an opportunity to amplify this, to talk about it. But at the same time, I felt like a chicken with my head cut off because it was so overwhelming. The press that was coming in, the questions, but I wanted to make sure I was doing it in the right way. And so I made a few mistakes, didn't say things perfectly or accurately, but luckily had some amazing mentors within those first few months after the Boston Marathon who really helped guide me and to make sure that the messaging always stays the same in terms of we have to center the families and the survivors and this hard work. And so from that point on, I honestly thought, okay, this has an impact. It's making people aware. People are talking about this. But the one thing that I didn't expect was that it was going to inspire other athletes, that it was going to inspire the next generations. And so a couple weeks after my Boston Marathon run, Rosalie Fish had reached out to me asking me to give her my blessing to do the same thing at her state track meet out in Washington, and that she just thought it was amazing to not only see a Native woman, but a Native woman athlete, and then a Native woman athlete advocating for something so important that she also felt a deep connection to, and having lost some of her relatives too. So of course I gave her my blessing. I thought this was amazing, that this is, the next generation, taking the torch and hopefully going to inspire more people. And that's exactly what she did. She inspired so many more people, elevated it even higher, and she was inspiring other athletes. And so now that I'm talking about the Boston Marathon now, just a couple days ago, we had the 2022 Boston Marathon. And this was just, kind of like a domino effect, a breadcrumb, a ripple effect of inspiration, and how we are, supporting each other within community, how we are amplifying things that are so important. And at this year's marathon, we had Native women running, Verna Volker, my sister friend, Dr. Lydia Jennings. We had these Indigenous women who were running for a purpose and running for a cause and running for justice and amplification. And so some of them ran for LMA. LMA was missing, and they're actually doing a walk from Arizona, I think Trailwater, Sweetwater, or I think in Arizona, from Arizona to Washington, D.C., and that begins on June 15th, I believe, and they're starting at 2:30 a.m., which is the time that LMA had gone missing. And then we had other Indigenous women that ran with the red handprint. We had other relatives who were running for a specific person that they had lost or within their communities that they felt a connection to. We had Indigenous runners that were running for Indigenous communities that had land back, that were restored and brought back to their communities. And so just the intersection of running and sport has just grown, and it's been amazing and awesome to see that. And honestly, I didn't see it before my run. I saw people running for a charity, for a cause, to help raise money, but I never really saw those issues within social injustice, within climate injustice, really brought into a competitive running platform. And I'm just really grateful and honored to, be a fourth generation runner, to have my running be a way to communicate something that is very important, not only to me, but to our communities, to help be an advocate, to help be a voice, to help amplify other voices and other advocates and families that are doing this work. And that's the very least that I can do. And so over time, as this platform has grown and transformed, and me doing a lot of learning to making sure I'm staying up to date as much as possible, staying connected to those doing this work as much as possible, that's led to this connection with NIWRC to help be an advocate, to help fundraise for NIWRC to support their hard work. So over time, since the Boston Marathon in 2019, Rising Hearts has been, pivoting to create a virtual platform, especially since we were in a pandemic. And one of the things that I did, since I couldn't organize a community run for May 5th back in 2020, I organized a run for myself to run 2 miles every hour on the hour from sunrise to sunset. And during that time, I was fundraising money for NIWRC and Seeding Sovereignty. And that's how we got connected. And I dedicated every single mile that I had run to an Indigenous relative who has been stolen or missing, and I saved a few of the last miles to dedicate miles to those that we had lost due to the pandemic at the same time. And that led to this connection, that led to this co-creation and this opportunity to continue to support NIWRC and those that they support. And one of the other things that Rising Hearts had started was creating a virtual running platform. So we partnered with our friends Elite Feats. We host virtual races online. And our first one was in June of 2020 to help raise funds for COVID relief, since we were donating and purchasing masks and face shields and supplies to donate to the communities. And then that led from there to the Indigenous Peoples Day run, to Orange Shirt Day, Every Child Matters run that's led to Running on Native Lands virtual runs, to our Running for Justice virtual runs. So this year, 2022, we are hosting our second annual virtual Running for Justice 5K, 10K, half marathon, and trifecta. We are also hosting now 2 in-person community 5K runs. And this is my cat MJ. But we have one in Los Angeles that's at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And then we are also hosting one at 8 a.m. Eastern time here in Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C., I will be at that location. Both of these runs are just group runs. It's not a race. It's about running together as community for a cause and for a purpose and for justice. We are hoping to continue raising funds that we can donate back to the beneficiaries of this run. NIWRC is one of those beneficiaries. Last year, we raised $77,000, very grassroots oriented, all from the people signing up for this registration and me doing it in terms of amplifying, creating social media content, helping to share newsletters and everything. And so this year, we're hoping to match that or more. And yeah, for our in-person runs, we have a couple of sponsors from the running community. My running sponsor On Running is going to be helping out. We're going to be having some, hopefully, shirts. We're finalizing that this week. Shirts for the run on May 8th. That's the in-person days. And the shirts will be, they'll have our No More Stolen Relatives Running for Justice logo printed onto them. We're going to have tech reps from On Running be there. So people that want to come, they have an opportunity to test out the shoes that On is going to bring. And then we have Goo Energy that is donating a bunch of gels and waffles and treats. And then we're also going to have just a little goodie bag to hand out to those that attend. So if you are listening to this and you are in these areas, Los Angeles or Washington, D.C., and you want to help out and you want to support, you want to run with us, or you want to just show up and just be in community, and let's say running's not your thing, that's totally okay. You are more than welcome to join us and be in that space. And it's going to be so good to be back into community. Both locations, we are organizing land acknowledgement speakers and blessings. We're organizing to get drummers and singers to perform there at the beginning and at the end of the 5K group run. And we're just really looking to make sure that, one, not only can we continue organizing for May 5th to help support the Week of Action, to help uplift Hannah Harris and fight for justice for her and to support her family, but also to fight for justice and to support all the families who have lost loved ones, and that we can help continue to amplify their messaging and the hard work of organizations like NIWRC that are completely devoted and committed to supporting the families. And so, yeah, that's just my story. This is how I'm using my platform and the connections and resources that I have to better amplify and to better hopefully give back to community to support this hard work, and to also hopefully, show what it is to be an Indigenous woman, to be a survivor, but also to be an advocate, and how you can be an ally, to be a co-conspirator within this work. So I'm really deeply honored to be that. I continue to do this work. I'm going to continue fighting. I'm going to continue running for justice, continue using my running to dedicate a mile and a prayer to someone who I've been connected to families that I've been able to speak with, to other communities that I have been able to communicate with and connect with at the same time. And just really grateful to be here in this virtual space with you, and I'm really honored. So I really hope that those listening to this, please take to heart everything that the families are talking about, that the organizations and advocates are speaking to, that the allies and co-conspirators are also speaking to. Be proactive in your unlearning and relearning. Sign up for the webinars, rewatch the webinars, download the reports, listen to the podcasts, read the books, and just be in this heart work with us so that we can fight for a better future that is thriving for Indigenous peoples, thriving for everybody, that we have a better and safer future free from this violence, that we are truly visible, that we are truly uplifted and respected, and that we are protected. Mopila Tanka, many thanks for this opportunity to be a voice. Mitakuye Yasin, all my relations, we are all related. And I would like to hand it off to Shara now. Thank you so much.
Mado, thank you, Jordan. Your running to organize for change inspires us to care for ourselves while we care for our sisters, daughters, mothers, nieces, and granddaughters. Thank you to Melinda, Yolanda, Grace, Melina, and Tiffany for sharing your truths about and honoring Hannah, Sierra, and Laverta. Their beautiful, strong-hearted spirits live on in each of you and now in all of us. They and other missing and murdered Indigenous women will never be forgotten. We support you, we believe you, and we stand with you and your families. You are beacons of light, hope, and healing from which will affect ongoing changes that protect Indigenous women and strengthen sovereignty. We will continue to turn our grief, frustration, and anger into action. Please join the efforts of these families, advocates, tribal leaders, and tribal coalitions and programs in your community. Regionally, nationally, and internationally, we can continue to raise awareness and advocate for change. If you haven't already, please sign on to our call to the United Nations to declare December 6th as the International Day of Femicide. We have seen and felt the power of our people joining together today, May 5th, for community and justice walks, marches, runs, candlelight vigils, and rallies. We extend our prayers to honor missing and murdered Indigenous women across our nations, across our borders, and the world. Again, please see our 6-point action plan available in the Restoration magazine to reform current systematic barriers and restore safety of Indigenous women. Paula, back to you.
Thank you, Jordan and Shara. For more information, please visit NIWRC's and all of our partners' websites. The Pohana's website will be coming soon, and you may reach out to them by filling out the contact page on their website. In addition, NIWRC has our special edition of our Restoration magazine dedicated solely to MMIW, released this past January. We also have a guide and additional info for when a loved one goes missing. Please share with each of your networks, tribal leadership, family, friends, organizations, and communities. And now for our sister Juana to close us out in a good way.
You know, when you call Creator, come be here. Come be a part of us. We, the people of the West, are asking the Creator surround all of you and all that you've done, whether you gave voice to the words, whether you watched it all happen, where you listened to it happen, where you felt your heart ache and soar with joy, pride, sorrow, and thoughtfulness. All those things that you felt and experienced, I'm holding in the sacred manner that who we are as a people. As the Indigenous people of this land, of the tribal nations of this land, and all those who joined us from all the different places, all our relatives in Hawaii, all our relatives in Alaska and Canada and the Americas, who have joined us, and listening of all the leaders of the nations who will gather and advocate on our behalf for we could protect our missing and murdered, so that we could have the accountability that needs to be done, that we can have the language that Creator has given our ears to hear, that when we give breath to the words we tell you, they don't belong to us, they belong to the people. When I think about how I breathe and how you breathe and how we breathe this week, all those things we thought, blow that air, bring in that air, let it embrace you. Let that breath hold you, because somebody thought, whispered, said the words you needed to have. Let them hold you, cherish you. Let them lift you up. Those of us who felt the anger and sorrow that wanted to shake our fist at something, hold those arms strong and carry. Know we carry it with you, that we hold you and understand what you feel. As you walked from the east to the west, to the north, to the south, as you heard what was said, those who saw what was said, those who felt what was said, and all of that, you have also done it in such a way that all the sisters who have gone, that you sing them home. Some of my relatives may be in your nations or on your lands who won't make it home to us physically, but their spirit has felt this week, raise their spirit to sing them home, to be embraced and held by our relatives who have gone before us, by all the nations we represent, all the peoples we represent, that they have been embraced and gone before us. And I thank you with the most humblest heart, most humblest breath, that you sing our relatives, our sisters home. When you walk your next steps, remember, whatever creature there is will be your teacher that day, will hold you and guide you from this journey this week. Those of you who feel and embrace, whether it be the air, the water, the fire, or the wind, it is also your strength that will be given to you, to back you in the winds as you run, to cool you off as you run, to drink that water, to soothe your body and restore your thirst to a place of balance, to take that earth moving around you, and as you step on it and move on it, as you sit on it, that it holds you. Also to know that as you warm yourself from the fires, whether you go into sweat, whether you go into a burning, so that things can be released, let that be. The air you breathe, again, I say, when you give breath to the words, they no longer belong to you. They belong to the people. That I ask you to remember, sing our sisters home. In our own way, Shopuno Yuli, we sing those songs. We sing about the journey home. So sing your songs, sing them loud, sing them in a whisper for the baby that sleeps, who we pray and hope and never know the violence that has visited us and our women's. And that those who have to be held accountable, that they be held accountable, not with hatred, yes, anger sometimes, not with such malice that it gets in the way of our sacred journey of breathing it in and letting it go. All of you have done great things this past week. You have witnessed and seen and met new people. Cherish this time that you stood strong and did what you had to do for all of us. From the east to the west, from the rising of that sun to the setting in Hawaii, to our relatives to the north and south. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Creator's love is so vast and so great that you are embraced every day. Remember, when you dream, Ask Creator, give to me the things I must know. And when you wake, Creator, show me what I will be doing with the things you gave me. And sometimes, my relatives, it may be a hum. Someone don't know, but you're humming a tune, a song, a melody, a note or two. But what I want to tell you is we understand in my world, when your dream time and you wake up with that, Creator gave that to you so that it would resonate all the way through your body and all the way out and heal you. For it is the harmony that balances you. And it comes in your dream time. So I am going to pray and wish with great joy in my heart that each of you get that from this week's journey. That little something that Creator gives you in your dream time when we're out of the way as human beings. So that when you wake and you have that little bit of something going on, not connected to anything but just you, that it's healing your body all the way through and all the way up. So with this, I humbly thank you for letting me give you this prayer. The joy of my heart and my sacred being and self, I celebrate all of you, and I will sing our sister's home, Chonamish, all my relations. Away, it is finished.
Thank you, Juana, all of our speakers, and all of you for joining us today and this past week and sharing our time together to honor MMIW. Thanks to the Family, Youth, and Services Bureau at the Department of Health and Human Services for their ongoing support and partnership and support of today's webinar. Please complete our webinar survey, which you'll receive after this webinar. A special thanks to our NIWRC policy team and to the Vedon Foundation for supporting NIWRC's work to organize our National Week of MMIW action with our national partners and family advisors. We are restoring sovereignty and increasing Indigenous women's safety as strong hearts united, organizing for change.